All right, now Lisa's out sick, so we'll just we'll get through the standard procedure stuff. I'll take over for that. Unless Lisa, you want to lead roll call. And seeing you're muted, I will.
I'm sorry, I was just coughing.
All right, go for it.
I can read the roll if you'd like.
Thank you.
Okay. We are recording. It is 4:08 p.m. Welcome to the University Hill Commercial Area Management Commission meeting. It's Tuesday, September 5th, 2023, and I will call roll. Cheryl Liguori, she's not present. Trent Bush. Ted Rockwell. If you can hear me.
Present.
Andrew Shoemaker.
Here.
Okay. And Tel Jones. Thank you. And I'll turn the meeting over to our commissioners for procedural items.
Okay, seeing that Cheryl is not here and I'm co-chair, I'll be chairing the meeting from here forward. First thing in our procedural items list is the approval of the August 1st meeting minutes. Is there anything anyone wants to bring up around the meeting minutes from our August 1st meeting? Seeing none, I am accepting a motion to accept the meeting minutes as presented.
I move.
Trent moves, and do I have a second? Andrew seconds. All in favor? Aye. All right, it goes through. Perfect. So the meeting minutes are accepted. We are going to now move into a wonderful section of our meeting agenda, which is welcoming Tel Jones from the Sync to our commission here. Thank you, Tel.
Thank you
for your future leadership and service to this commission. And I guess there's a swearing in procedure that needs to happen here. So do I turn that over to you, Chris?
All right, I have a swearing in statement that you can repeat after me. Tel. I, Tel Jones, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
and of the state of Colorado
and of the state of Colorado
and the charter and ordinances of the city of Boulder,
and the charter and ordinances of the city of Boulder,
and faithfully perform the duties of the office
and faithfully perform the duties of the office
of a member of the University Hill Commercial Area Management Commission,
of a member of the University Hill Commercial Area
Management
Commission,
which I am about to enter.
which I am about to enter.
All right, congratulations. I just need you to sign this sheet and it's official.
Thank you.
All right, so next agenda item is elections for chair and vice chair. As everyone knows, Cheryl Liguori served as chair for many years, and she is going to step down from that role. I've been serving as vice chair. And so we will now accept nominations for the chair of this commission, as well as nominations for vice chair.
I'll nominate Ted Rockwell as chair. We need to. I would like to nominate Ted Rockwell as chair of the University Hill Commercial Area Management Commission.
All right, well, we have a nomination for chair. Are there any other nominations for chair? Seeing none, I'm going to, how about let's do nominations for vice chair and see if we can do a clear slate here. So nominations for vice chair.
I'll nominate Trent.
Oh, gosh. I just unmuted. All right, so we have a nomination for chair, Ted Rockwell. I would like to entertain nominations for vice chair, see if we can come up with a slate that we vote on all at once. So any nominations for vice chair?
Nominate Trent Bush.
We have a nomination for Trent Bush for vice chair. I will also nominate Trent Bush. Okay, let's discuss the nominations at this point. I'll just go ahead and answer for chair. I'm happy to serve as chair. And I'll do my best, my ability to show up for all y'all. I know you're all busy, so I'll do my best to kind of fill in those gaps. Trent as vice chair.
I'm worried about travel commitments, quite honestly, and my ability to serve as chair if
Right.
and when these things change.
Mhm.
And that's, I can see it on the horizon. So I'm very much, I appreciate it, but I'm very concerned that I'm not going to be able to be, live up to what it requires.
Do you have another nomination for that?
I mean, I don't want to put anybody in a position that they're not comfortable being vice chair,
All right.
unfortunately.
I'm gonna nominate Andrew Shoemaker as well, breaking parliamentary procedure slightly. Andrew Shoemaker, discussion around vice chair.
I'm happy, yeah, I'm happy to do it.
Okay.
Yeah,
So we have, wait, mute here.
Fine.
We have a nomination for Trent Bush that I will withdraw. Andrew, will you withdraw your nomination as well?
sure, yep.
All right. So we have nominations for Ted Rockwell as chair and then Andrew Shoemaker as vice chair. Any further discussion on these nominations? All right, seeing none, I would like to entertain a motion to accept the slate of Ted Rockwell as chair and Andrew Shoemaker as vice chair. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Trent moves. Do I have a second? Tell you can do it. Yeah.
I'll move.
Tell Jones is our second. Any further discussion before we move on to a vote? All right, I'm going to call for a vote. We'll do it roll call style. Trent Bush,
Yes.
Andrew Shoemaker,
Yes,
Tell Jones,
Yes.
and Ted Rockwell. Yes, we now have a chair and vice chair. Thank you for your patience as we work through that sticky wicket of who is going to be vice chair. Thank you, Andrew. All right, let's see. We have reached the portion of the agenda where we have public participation. Do we have any members of the public present for the public participation portion of our agenda?
We do have a member of the public and the attendees. If anybody any members of the public would like to speak, if you could raise your hand, we can allow you to speak at this time. Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Chris. Let's see, in consent agenda, do we have anything in the consent agenda that we want to be dealing with? Or any questions around fund financials? Seeing none, we're going to move to the Hill Boulder update from Jake. Is Jake present?
Jake is out sick. He said he did not have any updates to bring to us today. So we can move into matters from staff. Unless there are any questions you'd like us to pass on to Jake.
Any questions for Jake Hill? Gonna be a lot of activity up there this weekend. All right. Let's move into matters from staff. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to ask all the commissioners to keep if you're in the room, keep your mics on mute. for Carl as he's going to go through a presentation from my computer because he's also having technical difficulties. Do you want to just drive from here?
Sure.
The presentation is going to show up on your screen, so I'm going to share the presentation shortly. So if everybody could follow the presentation from Zoom, let me get that going. Oops. Are you going to need your notes? Okay. There we go.
Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Carl Geiler. I'm Senior Policy Advisor with the Department of Planning and Development Services. We wanted to come before you this afternoon to talk about some code changes that we're working on for our land use code. This is where like zoning regulations apply to different parts of the city. This is a project called the Use Table and Standards Project. We've been working on it actually since 2018. It's had probably, I think, 5 ordinances to date that have made changes to our use standards for different parts of the city. So right now we're working on, we're in the second phase of the project. We actually call it Module 3 now because like we're on our, I think our 4th ordinance for this phase. And it relates to University Hill. So we wanted to get your feedback. So as far as the initial goals of the project, it's really been about taking a look at our land use code and seeing where we could simplify standards and make it more readily understandable, adding more predictability and certainty to our use standards, but also taking a look at the latest update to the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan that was done in 2015, added some policies that related to mixed use, industrial areas, neighborhood centers, and really trying to update our land use code so it's in line with the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. That's the whole point of planning in the city, is that the vision is set by the comprehensive plan, and then we change the land use code to align with that. So any areas where we see any kind of gaps that don't meet the plan or anything where we could allow more uses more readily, what people are looking for, we do that through these types of updates. So the focus of this, what is really hoping to be the final ordinance of this project, is looking at neighborhood centers. So if you've been following this project, we did a phase where we looked at the opportunity zone, which is like the northeast quadrant of the city, and looking at the use regulations there and updating those to be more friendly to retail, trying to get more housing opportunities. We worked on the industrial zones several months ago, where the comp plan was updated to basically allow more mixed use and allow more housing, but also try to preserve industrial uses. So we updated the code along those lines. So the focus of this particular part is on neighborhood centers, and University Hill is one of the neighborhood centers. And really what we're trying to get at is trying to make sure that these neighborhood centers have a mix of uses that is conducive to people wanting or being able to walk to those uses rather than having to drive everywhere, making sure our zoning is allowing these uses and removing barriers from uses that people, like a small hardware store or retail, things that where you can encourage people to walk to those centers. This is the concept of 15-minute neighborhoods. It's something that we'll probably have to keep doing. Obviously, there's a lot of parts of town that are, singular use, like single family areas. I think we've been asked to look at, opportunities for trying to get more nodes of commercial. I think it's going to be an ongoing conversation, but the focus of this particular part of the code is really have been on restaurants, duplexes and townhouses, because they're considered middle housing. We're trying to get more middle housing, which is like most of the housing that we get in the city is single family or stacked housing apartments, 3- and 4-story buildings. We're trying to get more of the duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and townhomes, which are kind of scaled more like single family homes, but allow more modest sized homes. So that's one area we've been looking at. It's just any kind of uses that can encourage walkable centers. So this map that you see in the presentation is the identified neighborhood centers in the city of Boulder. University Hill is one of those. These are the zoning districts that are identified as neighborhood centers or Boulder Valley Regional Center, commercial area. So we're talking about the BMS zone, which is Business Main Street. That's University Hill. So the draft ordinance that we have now is really taking a hard look at restaurants. We've heard some concerns on the Hill that the regulations that we have in place now are overly prohibitive and have maybe impacted the economic health of the Hill. I actually worked on code changes like over 10 years ago that related to things that council at that time had asked us to look at. What we've been asked by the current council is to relook at those standards and maybe treat them more in line with what we have in the areas that surround the downtown, maybe have similar type regulations. But really, when we look at restaurants in the land use code right now, it's very complicated. There's 12 different categories basically for restaurants that we look at that relate to the standards of their overall size. If they're over a certain size, they might require a different process. We look at patio size and we also look at hours of operation, and it's different for all these different parts of the city. So that's something that we've been trying to simplify. So obviously, like I said, University Hill is one of the more unique restaurant standards that exist today. What was passed 10 years ago was that all restaurants on the Hill require a conditional use, which is a staff level review. It doesn't require any public process, but it does require public notice for a good neighbor meeting. So a good neighbor meeting is required for every restaurant. What the code says now is that if there's a liquor license, the establishment has to close at 11 p.m. If it doesn't have a liquor license, its hours are unlimited. There is no use review option. Again, this was something that the council 10 years ago had requested. We've been hearing some concerns about that and how it's impacted the Hill. Really quick, we've also made some changes to regional parks related to restaurants. We've also made some changes in the industrial zones related to restaurants. So what the current ordinance has in it is it would treat the Hill similar to some of the interface areas that are around downtown Boulder. So we have very flexible restaurant regulations for like the Pearl Street Mall area and like along Canyon. But when you get into those interface areas that are adjacent to residential, there's more restrictive standards. What this ordinance would do is it would loosen up some of those standards to be more conducive to restaurants, but also trying to get at some of the impacts that those restaurants might have on surrounding areas and putting those rules in the code. We already get a lot of use reviews in that area, and a use review is basically an application that does have public noticing and sometimes might have to go in front of planning board, sometimes might get called up to city council. Usually the conditions of approval that get approved with a use review relate to trash pickup, their hours of operation, things like that. So we've tried to take a lot of those requirements and put them into a more straightforward staff level process. So what's being proposed for the Hill is basically keeping the 4,000 square foot maximum for the Hill, which exists today, and the 11 p.m. close, but make it by right rather than a conditional use. It could just, if they're not over that size or they close at 11 p.m., it could be a by right situation. This is also proposed for the other zones that you see on the screen. If they want to have a larger establishment or be open after 11 p.m., it would be a use review. So we haven't been reviewing use reviews on the Hill for over 10 years. So we do want to get some feedback from the commissioners on this particular change. We've also changed out the automatic requirement for use review for any outdoor seating within, I think it's 500 feet from a residential zone. What we're proposing is that any establishment that's closer than 300 feet from a residential zone just has to meet some standards related to outdoor seating. They have to, turn the noise off or any kind of audible sound by 11 p.m. A lot of these are standards that we already have in the code, but we're making it a little bit more streamlined. So we've gotten a lot of feedback from the community on restaurants broadly in the community. We've been hearing a lot of, since COVID, basically trying to loosen up regulations for restaurants. You could, if you're familiar with the outdoor seating program in the city, there's a lot of appetite now to be a little bit more flexible with outdoor seating and just in general towards restaurants. And that's what we've been hearing across the board. We do have a public working group where we heard support for these changes. There have been some concerns from some members related particularly to the Hill and loosening up the standards on the Hill. University Neighborhood Association sent a letter on this topic as well, being opposed to changing the regulations on the Hill. We've also talked to the community connectors and residents, again, trying a lot of support for restaurants, comments about simplifying food truck regulations, since a lot of restaurants make their start as food trucks and ultimately become bricks and mortar establishments. So when we talked about this particular project with City Council at a study session on July 27th, they were in support of streamlining the standards and the review processes for restaurants. Council specifically had asked us to streamline the regulations for the Hill based on the concerns that they've been hearing. So that's what is currently within the draft ordinance. Again, that's what we want to get your feedback this afternoon on. When we went to Planning Board on August 15th, Planning Board recommended approval of the ordinance, but they explicitly wanted the University Hill changes to be removed from the ordinance. So we'll be conveying that to City Council. They recommended that Council direct staff to actually make any changes to the Hill regulations a separate work program item to be prioritized with other work program items in January during the retreat, and something that we maybe take up later and do more public process to determine what changes should be made. So as far as the next steps, we're still working on the ordinance preparation. We want to get your feedback on that, on those changes on the Hill. We're scheduled to take the ordinance through first reading at City Council on October 19th, and then November 2nd would be the second reading and public hearing before Council. So again, we'll convey any feedback from the Commission to City Council. So that concludes my presentation. The question that we have for the Commission is, does UCAMC have any comments related to the proposed changes related to restaurants, brew pubs, and taverns in the University Hill General Improvement District?
And I might start, before we get into discussion from commissioners, let's try to use the microphone on my computer so we don't have to deal with, I want to make sure that Andrew's able to chime in easily. So if you could just speak up, we'll see if that works.
Sure.
Any questions?
Quick question. I apologize if it was I might have missed it I was looking through the packet right now. What was the planning board's vote and what was the rationale for that they expressed for doing a separate Hill process?
Let me check. Yeah, I actually wasn't present at that meeting, and I'm actually covering for
Well, then I'm happy to chime in.
okay, yeah, that'd be great.
And I don't recall the exact vote, but essentially they voted to approve the changes for all of the areas under consideration with the exception of the University Hill General Improvement District. And this was based on feedback received from a few residents who testified at the public hearing they brought up all of the issues from about 10, 15 years ago in their testimony. And so the planning board recommended to council that the University Hill area not be considered for these changes.
And was it, I guess it sounds like they're, from what you said, they're interested in a public process, which obviously that's important. But what would be lacking about the current public process as opposed to a separate public process for the Hill? Because there would still be a public hearing in front of council, as I understand it.
Correct.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, I think the issue related to the hill kind of came up later in this particular project. I think we did look at ways to streamline the University Hill regulations early on and got general feedback through our questionnaire online, but there wasn't a lot of direct feedback with the neighborhood or with this board or the University Hill, revitalization group, because we didn't really know exactly what changes would happen on the hill until the council had directed us explicitly to really try to make the University Hill regulations uniform with those of like around the downtown, like in the DT 1, 2, and 3 zone. So I think there's some concern that maybe because it came, more later in the process that we should do more outreach before those changes are made.
And final question, do you have I heard the reference to, a retreat. Do you have a sense of what this schedule would be if this were put on a separate track?
I think it really depends on what other work program items come up for the retreat and how the council prioritizes them. I think, we'd have to determine at that time what a reasonable timeline would be, but I think the changes are relatively focused to a small area of the city, and I think we could try to do it in maybe like a 6-month time frame.
Right, and I know I said it was the last question, but sometimes I'm wrong. So it sounds like, I mean, really what might be involved here is some, if this is the way that it happens to go, would be an additional public process, but it sounds like staff might have already, because of this other work, staff's already done a lot of the work, so it perhaps could be move a little more quickly if we did get bumped to a second track, move more quickly than something typically might.
It's possible. I mean, again, we don't know what the composition of council is going to be after the election and what they prioritize, or whether or not this council opts to include these changes or not.
Sure, okay. I'll be quiet.
And just to clarify, that we didn't get specific feedback for the zone 4 or the EMS zone. Because I was looking through the packet and it looked like there was feedback for every other zone by these zones, right?
There was a story map that was done online that had some general questions that related to like neighborhood centers. So I think there was a lot of feedback that just talked about simplifying and streamlining process. I believe it did include the BMS, but I'd have to go back and double check that, because I think it was looking at BMS and a number of other zones where we have neighborhood centers.
Yeah, and looking at the map, there was no feedback from the entire universe, including the residential zone. There was no pin drop there. I was just interested to see if it was.
Oh, like specific
Specifically
feedback.
explained.
Yeah. I don't know that we got anything like that from the dropped pins. Yeah.
So this is basically saying that we don't want to change the Hills policies right now, liquor licenses. Is that what we're,
No, I think
that we want to keep it, or we want to make it easier?
Yeah, I mean, the proposal now,
proposal.
in the ordinance that we have now, the draft would actually significantly streamline it. So it
Right.
would remove the requirements for food sales. For instance, like 50% of sales have to be from food. It would remove, the 11
Okay.
PM closure if you have a liquor license.
Okay.
I would add that after the planning team went to council on this topic, we then went to council related to the University Hill revitalization work that Regan's been leading, and posed some of these questions to council as well, in addition to some other University Hill specific regulations that aren't tied to restaurants, but more tied to affordable housing requirements. And there's also still the 500-foot rule for schools for liquor licenses. So this work that planning's been leading around neighborhood centers didn't touch. That will still be a requirement on the Hill that's limited currently or to beer and wine for any new liquor licenses. So I bring this up because even if, council says thanks, no thanks to the planning board and their recommendations to eliminate University Hill from these current changes, we still are wanting to continue a conversation regarding other regulatory circumstances in the Hill area in the future work plan, as long as the new council agrees with us continuing to prioritize that work. So no matter what happens with these changes, we know that there's still some other regulatory nuances that exist on University Hill that don't necessarily exist in other parts of the city, that we want to make sure we don't lose in the context of the good work that planning's done around neighborhood centers citywide that might, through their process, make some steps for improvements and streamlining on the Hill, but doesn't necessarily, it didn't bring up all of the other regulatory nuances that we want to make sure don't get lost in all of that.
Chris, could you do a quick bullet point takeaway from what are the other potential regulatory areas of exploration based on that? Because I don't think we've had a meeting since that study session.
Sure. So it's pretty much the 500-foot rule that in the city it's a state law that no liquor licenses can be issued within 500 feet of a public school. That was rescinded for the University of Colorado in 1967 for beer, wine, and liquor. It was reestablished for liquor 10 years ago. So right now, any new liquor licenses on the Hill are that could be considered would be limited to beer and wine. So the conversation we want to have on that front is that still appropriate? And then, of course, the other one is just knowing that the previous previous housing moratorium on the Hill that lasted for a few years, that got translated into a requirement that any new housing on the Hill be 100% affordable. Just knowing that is another unique regulatory consideration for the Hill that we don't have in other places. Maybe it continues and that's fine. But we did raise those with council. They weren't super compelled to, the current council was not super compelled to explore changes on the affordable housing front, but they were very interested in pursuing changes on the restaurants, brew pubs, and tavern requirements.
Okay, and then a follow-up, what rules, I guess CU would have no rules, as I understand it, or correct me if I'm wrong, on the Limelight relating to any restaurant on their site. These rules we're talking about would not apply to them. Is that right?
Yes and no, in the sense of, I think that's what needs a little bit more analysis, because the Limelight Hotel is part of city annex space. It's not in the same realm of state property, if I understand correctly. That's where I think we need to be really sure for their benefit that the Limelight Hotel can operate a liquor license to the degree that we would all think would be appropriate for that type of facility. And I don't know that has been explored fully yet to understand what the implications of our current regulations within state law, how that's going to impact the Limelight and their ability to get to serve liquor.
So they may be very interested in the result of all this as well, depending on whether or not on their status in light of the land.
Exactly. And I would note that any existing liquor licenses that exist prior to the new rules in 2013 can be transferred to others. And so I'm not, that's again, there's stuff that has happened. There are still liquor licenses, I believe, that are great. I mean, the Sink has one and there are other establishments that may have access to liquor licenses that could be transferred. For instance, I'm not sure what happened with the bars at where the new Hill Hotel is going. And if they were able to somehow transfer their liquor licenses to the Hill Hotel, then maybe it doesn't impact that facility and their ability to serve liquor and be open later than 11 o'clock. But that's work that we want to dive into on this, just to be sure that we're not unintentionally burdening some establishments that probably it would be reasonable to expect folks would like to order liquor beverage at least up to 11 p.m. and if not after.
Yeah, that was my follow-up question, and that seems like a critical issue as well. And then we've got a timing issue, right? In light of everything that's been talked about in terms of sidetracking this discussion. Also, it seems like I'm surprised. I mean, I guess I would expect the new Hill Hotel to be very interested in this in light of their anticipated opening date, and it seems like it shouldn't whatever track this gets put on, it would be useful to get this resolved certainly before the Limelight and the Hill Hotel open their doors.
Sure. Well,
Yeah.
in Carl's defense, he doesn't set the work plan, but I have had conversations with Brad Mueller many times, the planning director, on this front. And unless we get some sort of significant swing from a new council, I do know that Brad intends to work with Community Vitality and various boards and commissions to get this work accomplished in 2024. Especially depending on what happens with this particular neighborhood centers conversation.
Yeah, I concur with what Andrew was just saying about the relative urgency. I work a block away and the Hill Hotel is turning the corner. I would add to that question of whether or not we've engaged as the city, the business owners of the Hill Hotel and Limelight in discussions with, say, council or planning board around this. It seems like their voices are not present here. I didn't see anything in the packet. I think that they would have a lot to say about what this outcome may be, and ways to maybe support that, and also address any sort of public interest that could be that end. I know that just getting to the place of having the Hill construction start was something that involved a lot of public process. And I know that those individuals who are involved are very keen on making sure that folks are informed about what's happening.
Yeah, we'll reach out to them for sure.
Any other, did you get the comments you were looking for? Is there anything else you wanted us to specifically provide any feedback on?
I mean, just in general, is the commission supportive of loosening the rules, or is there concern with loosening the rules?
I'll voice my position, and I'll open it up for other commissioners as well. Generally supportive. Also wanting to make sure that the community's voice is heard in this process, but want to reflect the urgency of making sure that we take advantage of a new set of businesses starting on the Hill. That is a once occurring opportunity that does not just hang around. So we need to make sure that we do this in a way that expedites the process. Anyone else have comments?
I would definitely concur with that.
Yep.
The Hill has seen a steady decline of sort of its vibrancy over many years. This isn't the only thing. The regulatory side isn't the only thing that has caused that, but it also hasn't helped it. And so I think, looking at revisiting what decisions were in the past, really looking at, did that make an impact? Did that actually change things for the better? Or did it just make more red tape for businesses to be able to succeed? What did it do to our tax base up there? You know, I mean, all of these things are things that I think we need to do some real look at. And I would also just say, and I guess a question real quick, was the UI TAP study result represented at that meeting as well?
At the study session,
Okay.
yes.
So anyway, I concur that public, you know, needs to be a huge part of this. But that includes the business owners and everybody that currently does business up there, and especially the new hotels, for sure. And just one point of clarification, and so school, that term is it's not just PVSD. It's just
Naropa has
any-
an exemption as well.
I'm sorry.
Naropa is also considered a school that that required an exemption. So yeah, it's not just BVSD.
Okay, so the CU has a exemption, sorry, for the
Oh,
Hill.
sorry. So on CU campus?
Yeah.
So they handle their own, because they're a state entity. The Board of Regents, I think, has a lot to say about alcohol sales on main campus. It's the properties that they have purchased that are outside of their state main campus that it's a bit ambiguous in my mind right now of where the city's regulations come in and the state has control.
Okay, so I guess my question, you said that there was some sort of exception in the sixties.
Right. For 500-foot rule outside the boundaries of a public school, which would
For
include
just for the Hill,
any.
to CU, that proximity.
Yeah, exactly. The whole boundary all the way around CU campus, there's a 500-foot rule that liquor licenses cannot be issued for anything other than beer and wine. Currently.
I was just trying to parse the difference between CU and Boulder High, because the limelight is going to be 5 feet from both of those.
Sure.
So if there's a difference, that's another thing that's
Yeah.
considered. But if there's not, then it's totally.
There would be a difference, and so that would need to be, we would need to make sure that that's taken into consideration as well, the proximity to CU or to Boulder High.
I concur with that entrance.
Let's do it.
Thank you, Carl. We appreciate this presentation. Let us know how we can support your work as you move forward.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carl.
Thank you very much for that.
No problem. Let's stop sharing. All right, next up. Hope everyone missed Mark Wolf. I'm not sure how much overlap we have on our UCampsy since Mark Wolf was a member of the Community Vitality team. But the commission will recall that our last meeting, we got together and discussed the proposed budget. It's now been measured against all of the other proposals and needs across the city. And we are making some adjustments before the final budget goes to council. And Mark is here now as the Chief Budget Officer for the city to talk with you all about our long-term approaches to the UGID fund and some changes that are going to be included that we'd like your consideration on for the budget to council. Sound good, Mark?
Sounds good.
All right, I'm gonna mute and turn my, oh, you're not on, then yes.
Everybody. I'm Mark Wolf, Budget Officer for the city, was recovering Community Vitality staff member. I can be pretty brief. I think the main reason I'm here is just to talk about the change and big change that impacts UGID is the approach on the general fund transfer to UGID. So annually, there's as you probably know very well from Teresa running through the fund financials, the general fund transfer to UGIT is important for the health of the fund and to be able to help support operations on the Hill. And appreciate that you all did the work in kind of determining what that recommended level of funding was from the general fund for 2024 and going forward. As Chris mentioned, a tougher budget year than we've had over the last couple coming out of the pandemic as revenues have been recovering. In the general fund in particular, we're weighing a number of different challenges related to, and I could get into some of the detail, but I think bottom line is there were a number of new expenditures that council approved in 2022 for 2023 budget that impacted our flexibility. We also are budgeting for a degree of caution related to the expiring 0.15 sales and use tax. So that tax is expiring at the end of 2024. There's a ballot item on the ballot in November that would dedicate 50% of that general fund tax to arts, with the remaining 50% staying as a general fund revenue. So if that does pass, we have to essentially replace that ongoing revenue in some way to fund current ongoing operations. And that's balanced with some flexibility on the property tax side. That's been well publicized. Property valuations going way up, so that impacts property tax revenues in a positive way. So all of that was kind of weighed as we were looking at all the various different needs in the general fund. And the recommended budget that was going to city council keeps the level of subsidy or the level of transfer from the general fund to UGIT at the same as it was in 22 and 23. That is recognizing that there still is this long-term issue. So I think that's one thing we wanted to just make sure it's clear. It's not just, oh, sorry, no thanks, see you later. It's more of an invitation to continue the conversation in a variety of different ways. I mean, one, I think the difference was like maybe about $75,000 between the recommended budget and the request. That's not going to solve the long-term issue in the fund. So there's that factor. And then knowing that you all have had some discussion about what does it take to potentially look at the Tabor restrictions in the district and generate some degree of incremental additional revenue. The combination of those approaches in the general fund, what does that mean for long-term fund health? And so I think the conversation and the research has already started with partnership with our city attorney's office is looking at what are those long-term strategies for the district to make sure that there are those resources. And if it is general fund being kind of the only solution, then what is that level of support needed for what and for what period of time versus property tax solutions, so on and so forth. So happy to kind of have more of a discussion about what that looks like in advance of the next budget cycle. But I think we just wanted to deliver that news in person instead of just saying, here's the budget. See you later, see you next year. But have an open dialogue about long-term fund health and what those mechanisms might be as we prepare for the future.
And in short, acknowledging that by ordinance, part of the responsibility of UCAMC is to approve or recommend a budget to city council for the UGIT fund. And the budget that you considered and voted unanimously to recommend at our last meeting had a $350,000 general fund transfer proposal in it. And that's been adjusted back to the 270. We just wanted to daylight that with you all before it is in front of council. And if there was a desire of a majority to recommend a different motion, then so be it. But we didn't want to presume that you all were going to be just yet okay with that change without us daylighting with you before it goes to council.
Appreciate that. So where was our recommendation was 350? Where were we the prior year?
270.
It's just back to where we were in the prior year. Well, it's interesting how these things work. Just talking about zoning and regulation affecting business that would potentially lack in that area. So I appreciate the daylighting of this. I'm not sure that there's much I'm going to try to push back on there. I know that we were looking to get additional funds, particularly this year, going into probably within this fiscal year, the city of hotel. So I think that was a portion of what we were looking at there, is to make sure we have additional resources to us.
And just to, reiterate what Mark shares, the intent is certainly not to suggest that there isn't an understanding across the whole organization that we need to be really thoughtful and careful in maintaining a good, healthy district. And so the sentiment is not too bad, we're not giving you money. It's more, let's make sure that we're taking exploring all avenues approach, as opposed to, hey, we've always gotten this amount from the general, or not always, but previously we had this amount and we just need more money from the general fund and then everything's great. Because even when we were funded at that level, it's not like everything was great. So it's acknowledging that yeah, we could work the general fund transfer to make the fund balance over time seem healthier, but we're not necessarily getting to the level of service that I think everybody's been suggesting that they would like to see up there. And so it's more, instead of just duct tape and twine to hold everything together and have the fund financial look good, it's more, let's have this broader conversation, understand how do we actually pursue long-term health for the district.
So my big question, I guess, is will this in any way impact our investment? So we won't.
Correct. UGID does not contribute anything to the ambassador program. That is 100% general. Well, about 100,000 of it is general fund dollars, and $45,000 is CU for the Hill portion.
Yeah, and to be clear, there was no reduction in operations on the Hill based on that increment. Just it impacts the fund as overall. But again, the difference between, what makes a healthy commercial district versus a healthy fund. I mean, those are two different questions. Certainly they're related, but I think the strategies are different for sure.
Well, I mean, in terms of long-term financial health for this district, that's obviously something we've been grappling with the staff grant and all that. I would say that we need to consider, trying to figure out how we can think actionable tactics there, so that we're not just, another study on the shelf. That's, I guess, goes without saying, right? If what we're seeing is that the city's general fund is sustainable for this district, and that the asset that we have in the street lot and the balance of the sale of the parking lot would be essentially jeopardized if we don't take some action to produce additional revenues for the district. We'd really be facing having to spend down on that reserve and then potentially doing something drastic. Still have.
All right.
I joke that I have most of the meetings over the last couple of months have been like I'm the rain cloud that comes into each room. So I apologize for that.
We did a request for speaking up too, just so as we move into the last item. So apologies for the microphone challenges. All right, last but not least, we have Lane Landreth on remote to share some updates around some changes for the RTD EcoPass program.
Thank you, Chris, and all the commissioners. As some may be already well aware, and I'm thinking I'm going to pick on Ted here, because I believe the university has already transitioned, perhaps even your Buff One card to be your new Eco Pass. So I'm seeing a little bit of agreement there. No, yes, no, maybe. So fast forward, we've been on the RFID chipped Eco Pass card since 2013, so 10 plus years. As with many software issues, it's out the door, and RTD has chosen a new vendor, and they are moving everyone mandatorily, of course, over to basically a app-based QR code to scan onto all RTD services, whether it's rail or bus. And that is definitely coming to all of our GID districts imminently. We have been one of the last to get brought on board by RTD simply because we represent so many different small businesses under what is called a RTD EcoPass master contract agent. And, so whereas I see you or the city of Boulder has easy way to track through HR as to who their folks are, who are the ratepayers. We get our information very much second and third hand from each employer. So in any case, in the coming weeks, I should be meeting with Regan tomorrow to come up with a communications plan, but I did share with you all in the chat there a sample of what we would probably be sending out to all employers very soon. Of note, it does require for each and every rider to be associated with an email address, which has never been the case with the current PASS program. So along with this message, they will be given basically a spreadsheet where they're to enter email addresses and first and last name of the employees that qualify. RTD's desire, of course, is that these be, company issued email addresses. And I have repeatedly told them that it's not going to be the case with small business. That's just not how it works. So that's the basic premise. We have a lot of challenges ahead of us in terms of getting this data in a short amount of time. And then what operationally happens is these spreadsheets get uploaded into this RTD portal, which then pushes out the initial email to each rider and explains to them how to move forward by putting an app on their smartphone and then going through the detailed sign up program. I myself have done it, and one of my biggest concerns, among others, is that this is a London-based software company. The terminology is not at all intuitive. They use, as my RTD rep tells me, the King's English. So something that's one of the most, one of many troubling items is they've got this message that shows up on the app that says, pop up your account. And I'm going to try to share my screen, and you guys are going to have to tell me if we have any luck. Post disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh,
all right.
We need to make you a co-host in order to.
On the flip side, Chris, if it's up to you, I emailed you these two images to your work email. So if that's easier for you to open them, but I'm happy to do either way.
I can try, just a moment.
In any case, so yeah, interesting. So Ted says if they've made this move, you're not yet in the loop yet. So I'm not sure if maybe it was students. Awesome. Thank you so much. So once you've done the app and gotten, and in any case, so the employee is going to get an introduction and saying, here's how you go in and start the process. One of those is you ask it to add a token to your account. What that does is then it pings basically now the city of Boulder to say, okay, now this employee wants to get their pass. And I have to go in and say, okay, we approve this, and that funds their account with yet another step in the process. Once that's completed, this is what your app would look like on your phone. And you've got that QR code that is scannable on all the RTD services. One of many problematic things, as you can see, is there's that command that says top up your account, which if it's your EcoPass, it's paid for. So why would you want to do such a thing? And why is that message there? So that's one of the many requests we've already made to RTD's vendor, is to, first of all, make it somewhat understandable. And then secondly, just take it off. Their excuse is that should the employee leave the districts, leave our program, they maintain this account in perpetuity, and then they can just add funds to continue riding the bus or the train. So there's a lot of details that I don't want to get into the weeds with you all, but just to put out the general idea. And luckily, I was able to tell Jones's ear on Saturday up on the hill, and was like, okay, you want to be my guinea pig? And he's like, sure, let's do it. So we'll be reaching out to the sync hopefully this week and see what we can get done. Any questions that
This doesn't affect the availability. That's just the implementation of writing, the way.
Correct. It does, but the devil's in the details. It doesn't limit the availability depending on technology. It's not like, every server at the sync has a sync.com email address. So it doesn't sound to me, according to what Lane has just said, that RTD has figured out how to accommodate personal emails and the current contract EcoPass program.
They're okay with it. It's just not their first desire for obvious reasons, that then we can easily track who works where if they have an affiliated company email. But I've already told them I would be shocked if we can even get 40% of our districts to have a work assigned email address, because of our small and independent and our service and hospitality based businesses. It's not going to happen.
That's also, I want to point out, it sounds like RTD has suggested that they need this conversion to happen by the end of this month. I don't know that that is a practical request, and I think we're also going to be pushing hard back on them so that folks can continue to use their old EcoPasses for a longer amount of time, so we can adequately get folks converted over to this medium, because that's just not enough time for the thousands of users that we have in the downtown University Hill and Boulder Junction.
Lane, when did this all start coming down? I had not heard anything to the university, and I would have met the staff get EcoPass, sure. And so I'm curious what the timing has been.
In bulk, oh, good. In bulk, we were told that this is coming down the pike. I believe it was in May of 2023. And at that point, I was on that meeting with some colleagues of mine. And then they're like, okay, but wait, we're going to start with Anschutz campus. We're going to roll them out. We're going to troubleshoot before we move down to other levels. And they admittedly said the general improvement districts in Boulder that are a master contract, where we literally have hundreds of different employers under the umbrella, we're going to save you for the very last, because it's just going to be the most challenging. To Chris's point, they're giving everybody this September 30th. You got to have it done. We as city employees were given that date as being, that's it. Your EcoPass will not work. Your current RFID pass will not work past September 30th. That motivates folks, of course, and go get it done. But is not going to be the case with our district writers. We also know is that this is the business EcoPass program. There's also a NecoPass that some of you may enjoy as well, your neighborhood EcoPass program. They've already admitted that their big push right now is for the business. They haven't even talked to or notified any of the neighborhoods. Hence, the old product with the chip is going to have to be continued to be accepted on their services, guessing through the end of the year. Having been through the process with the RFID chip in 2013, RTD pushed out, I believe, 3 extensions with no fare, no ride, no problem. They just, because they knew that not enough folks had had enough time to get it done. So I would anticipate that this could be the case. One quick point I want to make too that was flashed on one of the images is part of the new fare structure that RTD's board voted on includes a 0 youth fare, and that goes up to age 19. So for any of you who've got, you know, primary, middle school, high schoolers, or a college freshman or sophomore, they don't have to have an Eco-Pass or a card. They just show, they supposedly prove their age. They're writing for free, and that's already started. That's September of 2023 through, I believe, August of 2024. That's already underway.
I guess the only other question, is there some sort of equity piece for people who don't have phones? Is there an alternative to this?
Thank you for that question. So yeah, that was one of the very first ones, as I said, not everyone, or they're not going to be willing to provide one if so, but there is a MyRide physical card that we can get, and then as opposed to them using the app-based service, they can get this MyRide code that I believe has a QR code on the, I've actually never seen one. That's, and I guess, also problematic because we have to keep like a supply of them at our customer service desk at 15th and Pearl, so that folks could then come in person and say, you know, I don't have a smartphone, or I don't have an email address, or both. And that is the option that was offered.
So it exists.
It exists, yeah.
Elaine, when will you be getting me this spreadsheet or portal for the emails?
I'll let you know after I meet with Regan tomorrow.
Okay,
Likely this week.
is it a spreadsheet?
It's
Not a spreadsheet thing. You have draft language that you're gonna be sending to folks.
No.
Oh.
Not like that.
Elaine, what are you gonna be sending to the sync? It's like a template language, right?
right, correct.
And it's not a spreadsheet.
And well, what I looked at in the packet was basically a very rudimentary spreadsheet where they're to put, you know, the email address in column A and the employee's name in column B, and then send it to our email, and then I are going to upload that into the portal.
So then you
through the
likely
Excel
will fill out email addresses into a spreadsheet.
Okay.
from this spreadsheet.
Cool.
So again, I'm sorry, there's a lot of unknowns, but we wanted to at least introduce you to the concept that this is rolling out, and we'll be we'll start specifically with the UGID riders, as it seems like less onerous job to tackle than our downtown folks. So expect hopefully to see that later this week, early next week, and we'll see what we can get rolling.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Lane.
Thanks, Lane.
Sure.
And that concludes matters from staff.
Thank you, Chris. That moves us into matters from commissioners. Does anyone have anything they want to bring up here at this part of the year?
I just want to recognize the sync again, 100th anniversary. That was
Thank you.
a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It was incredible. It's quite an accomplishment. You know, between that and the game result, you know, the Hill definitely had more energy, positive energy, than I've seen in a long time. I thought the Event Street was really, I know it sounds like that it was difficult. The permitting process is still a little difficult. But I'm really happy it happened. really proud of you guys for pulling that off. It was really, really cool.
I worked hard that day.
Yeah, you did.
As opposed to other days?
Yeah. This one was extra special.
It was news coverage. Denver 7, I believe, had reporters up there. They'd actually reached out to the commission through the city, potentially have a commissioner available to talk. No one was available. I was out of town, Cheryl was out of town. And so unfortunately that was the case, but it was very positive set of news coverage about activities on the Hill and excitement around the football team, that kind of thing. So
Yeah, I didn't get the memo. I walked right by it. She was sitting up on the corner.
I should have.
But we did have the Fox 31,
Mhm.
the inside the same coverage was super good.
It was.
And
Did
I
anybody
managed to eat
notice-
3 meals in one day at the same time. Yeah, which is a new record.
Any damage anybody knows from activity on the weekend?
The only damage I saw was on Barstool Bus.
Right.
That's pretty much.
I saw attempted damage. I didn't.
Right.
Yeah.
There's some other stuff after that, but.
Yeah.
No, I didn't notice any.
It seemed pretty well behaved. I mean,
It was.
There was excitement,
Yeah,
In a
it
good way.
definitely was.
but again, stuff I hadn't seen in a long time. There was some damage. There's not damage. Some of the planters in front of specifically, what is it, Waffle Lab and Taco Junkie. Those planters are really muddy. And there's.
Oh, the tree
holes
well, the
there,
tree
trees,
wells.
yeah, which I wasn't sure. Are there grates that are missing now? I thought that was all like sorted out, but they seem to go missing, the grates.
No, there's never been grates. There used to be great big trees in those.
Mhm.
The standard tree grate that the city has does not fit into the size of the squares. And so over time, we want to upgrade those tree wells so that they can get our standard grate, and then we can plant a baby tree in them again. But the path from a mud pit to that is sometimes long and short, because we have that condition in a lot of places around the city. At the very least, we could consider filling it with asphalt or concrete until we're at a point where we can upgrade it with irrigation and tree grade.
So remove the tree.
Oh, so is there a tree in it
There's a
now?
tree in it
Oh,
now.
then, yeah, then, yeah, probably it's going, as long as there's a tree in it, especially a mature tree.
Mature tree.
Yeah, then there won't be it, then we let that tree live out its life and try to interfere with it as little as necessary.
What if it is an actual safety concern? If people are stepping into a big hole and probably getting hurt.
Then we can talk to our forestry folks and see if they, it's challenge, because we've got, again, it's a condition that we have in a number of places, and we try to be really careful around older, mature trees. But as you've seen on the Hill, there used to be a lot of trees on that block of College, or sorry, that block of 13th. We have some work to do some years to go before it's gonna be that healthy with a tree canopy again.
I would think if it's years to go, we should probably asphalt it.
So, and our
Because I can
forest,
see
so yeah,
people just
and our forestry
with
folks,
scooters and
yeah,
everything.
so our forestry folks handles all of the tree removal, replacement throughout the city. And so we partner with them on that. We try not to spend district dollars in the public right of way unless it's a physical improvement that the city wouldn't otherwise support. But we do have a forestry program that does provide trees and improvements throughout the city. So trying to lean on them, but as you can imagine, the number of trees that we have in the city, getting these particular locations to the top of their list, sometimes it can take something actually happening and getting reported to our risk assessor at the city to make a change.
Are you referring to the plant or to the squares without a tree?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we will not be putting asphalt around any squares with
Right.
trees in them. Yeah.
Well, I think this last weekend is a good data point on what we should be expecting in the next couple of years in that district. You know, with increased interest in football, home game this weekend against Nebraska. There's some big activity happening the next month, let alone the next couple of years with new hotel and the conference center showing up. So maybe that could be helpful in getting forestry to put a fine point on it. Because it's probably just a matter of time. Or, you know, there's other things that could happen. So,
Right, and that's the flip side is wanting to explore maybe a longer term major capital investment, leveraging maybe some huge dollars, but also other capital projects at the city to do a comprehensive redo on the hill, because it's been 25 years now since the last one.
Nice shirt.
what Lane
No,
is
Lane's
wearing
right.
is Think 100.
Has there been discussion about, yes, trying to make the hill to the hotel to downtown Boulder in one kind of transition, welcoming transition?
Yes, so there's a lot of work happening on that front currently, and this commission will, once the staff is ready to bring some questions and considerations to this and other boards that are also concerned about the same thing, from Transportation Advisory Board, Planning Board, Downtown Management Commission. So there is a work plan in 2024 to move that along. So you'll be hearing more about that soon.
Yeah, that's exciting. And one thing, I mean, we've heard a long time trying to bring people, I'm saying bring them up to the hill. Because it's the obvious path to go down the hill to downtown. It would be great if reciprocal is also something that's empowered and easy for people to imagine. I think that that's one of the things now that we're currently lacking. So exciting to hear what's happening there. Any other matters people would want to bring up? Andrew, remotely? No?
Just a quick question, have we gotten any response or feedback of was it September 1st when scooters were allowed? Everywhere?
Yes.
I think it was actually a week before, yeah. Yeah, it's, I think around then, yes. I have not heard any news, good or bad.
I
on
don't
how
know
that's
what we're
allowed.
going to, yeah, the scooter, the Lime scooters were just allowed west of 30th Street?
28th.
20th Street?
Yeah.
Yeah. Including campus.
Yeah,
So-
campus has got it. There's a ton, I've noticed on campus, there's a bunch. I mean, they're all over the place. And it's so far so good. I ride my bike every day to work and I haven't had any real issues in terms of people just parking them willy-nilly, which I think generally ends up being the biggest complaint is that there's something in the right of way, right? And they're fully activated at this point. I think it's been about 2 weeks.
Yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything good or bad so far.
Yeah, that's good.
And then one other thing, so the Hill Hotel, if you're looking north from the alleyway, is that the main entrance right there, right?
Yep.
Are they going to be, I've heard that they were going to be doing something with that alleyway, or is it just staying the way it is?
They are very interested in doing something with that alleyway, and they would possibly maybe contribute resources is what I've heard in conversations past, but they are not required or they've not committed to doing anything with that alleyway. We have approached the Transportation Mobility Department. They oversee all infrastructure in the public right of way. The challenge with that alleyway is it's in better condition than most of the alleys throughout the city. And so working with our partners internally to prioritize additional improvements to that alley when it compares to other alleys that transportation has been targeting. We are very interested in having every pedestrian connection to the new Hill Hotel be as pleasant and safe as possible. So we'll continue to explore ways to implement the alley plan that was produced, how many years? 2018, which certainly includes some proposals for that. There has been improved lighting. There were some trash enclosures, some combination of trash enclosures for businesses. So there might be a few other strategies that are still low hanging fruit for us to push along. But so yes, there are a lot of eyes on potential additional improvements to that alleyway, but nothing that the Hill Hotel is required to do as part of their project.
This is just a general observation, maybe as a way of closing matters from commissioners. And so Alice and the Rose, I believe, has opened at this point after a very long build out. Charming space. If you have an opportunity, you should definitely go and check it out. It's a nice high-end. Fingers crossed these guys survive because it's a nice space. And then the Spicy Pig is slated to open here next.
Spicy Pig or ginger pig?
Ginger Pig. Thank you. Sorry. Ginger Pig.
It's a spin-off. It's a spin-off around the corner.
But I think that they're turning a corner. Have you heard anything about when they're going to open?
They look like they're pretty close,
Yeah.
a month out maybe. But no, I have not heard. I do know that they want a James Beard for their Denver location.
So these
So
are
that's
exciting
good.
things happening on the Hill. I mean, as much as we want to there's a mud puddle and gee, did something get damaged? There's businesses opening currently and lots of activity happening. So lots of things we can lean into as positives to help continue that momentum.
Absolutely.
All right, anything else from the commissioners?
The last one, just, sorry.
Keep going,
I
man.
know, on that point, is it Dang Box? I don't know.
Yeah.
Do we know what happened? There's a sign on the door just saying the owner is hospitalized. I guess that was a question for Jake since he's not here. I was just concerned.
And did you all know that Chipotle has leased the Rosenberg space?
No,
Oh, that's news. No.
So that will, yeah, who doesn't love Chipotle?
the Hill loves Chipotle.
It'll be challenging for Illegal Pete's. That'll be some really close competition.
Yeah.
but
It's a big space.
Yeah, and they're just starting the city process. So, Rosenberg's.
Oh, okay.
Are they going in there with a beer license, I guess, or whatever kind of license?
Probably whatever was already tied to the space, but I'm not
Oh,
sure.
tied to the space,
Yeah.
not to, okay.
I know that Rosenberg's did get to a place where they were able to serve alcohol. I'm not sure if it was just beer and wine or that they had,
I think they have liquor.
so they were able to get their hands on one of the legacy permits licenses.
Does Chipotle currently serve alcohol?
Beer.
Beer, yeah, bottled beer. Yeah.
Okay, so a reminder that our next commission meeting is on Election Day, Tuesday, November 7th, 2023.
Mail-in ballots, so everyone should be done.
If there's no other matters from the commissioners, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for bearing with all the technical issues that we had today. Thank you, staff, for pivoting, Chris. Thank you.